In the shining halls of the Galactic Concordance, on Nexus Prime, many species gathered to talk and make rules. Ambassador Vexara of the Clithian Dominion stood tall, with bright scales that changed color when she felt strong emotions. She looked down at the smaller beings around her, with eyes full of pride and little care for others. The Clithians ruled many systems, with strong ships and sharp weapons. They believed they deserved more space and more power. Vexara came to this meeting to smile and speak soft words, while her fleets moved quietly to take new worlds. She wore fine robes covered in gold threads, and her voice carried like thunder, even when she whispered. That day, new faces joined the observer seats. Humanity had waited long to sit at this table. Many older species laughed at humans, calling them young and weak. They said humans still fought each other on their homeworld, and had only just learned to travel between stars. The Concordance gave them permission to watch, not to vote. Among the human group walked a man named Daniel Hale. He wore a simple gray tunic with no decorations. His hair showed some gray, and his face looked calm and tired. He carried an old datapad under his arm and kept his eyes low. Most people did not notice him at all. Vexara saw him during the first big reception. She stood with her aides, tasting sweet drinks from crystal glasses. One aide pointed at Daniel and said, "That one looks like nothing special." Vexara laughed loud enough for others to hear. She stepped closer to the human group and spoke in a voice that cut through the music. "Look at this little shadow," she said, pointing straight at Daniel. "He comes all this way to stand in the corner like a lost child. Humans must send their weakest to speak for them. How funny that your kind thinks you belong here." The room grew quiet. Some aliens smiled nervously. Others looked away. Daniel lifted his head and met her gaze. He did not frown or show anger. Polite smile, and bowed his head just a little. Then he said, "Excuse me, please," and walked toward the door. Vexara watched him go with bright amusement. She turned to her aides and said, "See how easily they run? They have no fire in them. The Dominion will take what it wants, and these humans will do nothing but write sad reports on their little machines." She raised her glass and toasted to the future of the Clithian race. Laughter followed her words. The reception continued with music and bright lights. No one thought more about the quiet man who left early. Daniel walked through the wide corridors of Nexus Prime. The walls glowed soft blue, and cleaning drones moved silently along the floor. He found a small balcony that looked out at the stars. He stood there alone for a long time, breathing slow and steady. He touched his datapad, and a hidden screen appeared. Words scrolled fast in code only he could read. He typed a short message and sent it away. The message traveled through secret paths that no one else knew about. When it finished sending, the screen went dark again. Daniel put the datapad back under his arm. He looked at the stars once more. They shone cold and endless. He whispered to himself one word only, "Soon." Then he turned and walked back inside. Days passed, and meetings continued. Vexara spoke often. She argued for new borders and more mining rights. She said weaker species needed protection, and the Clithians would give it for a fair price. Everyone knew what she really meant, but no one dared call her a liar to her face. Daniel attended every session. He sat in the back row and listened. He took notes on his datapad sometimes, but mostly he watched. He studied faces and listened to tones of voice. He learned who feared Vexara and who hated her quietly. He saw which ambassadors took bribes and which ones still held honor. One afternoon, a delegate from a small system asked about human colonies. Vexara answered before anyone else could. Humans spread like insects to places no one else wants. They build farms and factories on dirt balls and call it progress. True power stays in the stars, not on rocks. Daniel raised his hand for the first time. The chair recognized him. Vexara crossed her arms and waited with a smirk. Daniel stood up slowly. He spoke in a clear, calm voice. Our colonies grow food and build ships that trade across systems. We do not claim to rule the galaxy. We only ask to live in peace. If peace ends, we remember how to protect what is ours. The room stayed silent for a moment. Then Vexara laughed again. She said words of protection from the little shadow. How sweet. Maybe your farmers will throw dirt at our ships. Some delegates chuckled. Daniel sat down without another word. His face showed nothing. Vexara felt victory. She believed she had crushed him in front of everyone. That night, Daniel returned to his small room on the station. He locked the door and opened a hidden panel in the wall. Inside sat a black case. He opened it carefully. Tools and small devices lay neatly arranged. He selected one thin tool and attached it to his wrist. It looked like a bracelet, but it held power to break locks and jam signals. He practiced moving with it. His body flowed smooth and quick. Years of training showed in every step. He tested the device on a metal box. It clicked open without sound. He nodded once and put everything away. Outside the station, a small human transport waited. It looked old and slow. No one paid it attention. Daniel boarded it alone. The pilot said nothing. They jumped away from Nexus Prime, heading toward the edge of known space. Vexara spent that same night planning her next move. Scouts reported a human colony called Epsilon Verge. It sat far from help, with only 800,000 people. She smiled at the maps. Her fleet could reach it in weeks. She decided to test human courage there. If they fought, she would crush them. If they ran, she would take the world. Without firing a shot, she gave orders to her captains. Prepare the ships. We move soon. The galaxy will see who truly belongs at the table. Far away, Daniel traveled through dark space. He read reports on his datapad. Numbers and names flashed across the screen. He saw the name Epsilon Verge, and his eyes narrowed just a little. He closed the pad and leaned back in his seat. The stars outside moved slow and steady. He thought about the children on that colony, playing in fields and learning songs. He thought about the families who built homes from stone and steel. He thought about the promise he made long ago to keep them safe. He spoke to the empty cabin. One quiet sentence. They will learn what harmless really means. The transport flew on, carrying one man who looked like nothing special, toward a meeting no one else expected. The galaxy kept turning, unaware that a small shadow carried inside it the first spark of something vast and unstoppable. Months passed after the reception on Nexus Prime. Vexara returned to her flagship, Dominion's Fang, and gave orders to move her fleet toward the border system she wanted. The Clithians prepared quietly, loading weapons, fuel, and troops. They told the Concordance they went on training exercises. No one believed them, but no one stopped them either. Epsilon Verge sat at the edge of human space, a quiet world with green fields, wide rivers, and small towns. The people there farmed crops, raised animals, and fixed machines. They had no big army, only local guards with simple guns. They lived far from trouble and liked it that way. One morning, the sky above the main city filled with dark shapes. Clithian ships broke through the clouds like knives cutting cloth. They hung there, huge and black, blocking the sun. The colony governor received a message on every screen. Vexara's face appeared, tall and shining with scales. "This is Ambassador Vexara of the Clithian Dominion," she said in a cold voice. "Epsilon Verge now falls under our protection. You will hand over control of your mines, your farms, and your spaceports. If you agree, we leave your people alive. If you refuse, we burn your world from above. You have 1 hour to decide." People in the streets looked up in fear. Children stopped playing. Parents pulled them close. The governor stood in his office shaking. He sent a message back asking for more time to talk. Vexara laughed on the open channel. "Time is over," she said. "Watch and learn." The first strike came fast. A bright lance of plasma fell from orbit. It hit a power station on the edge of town. Fire bloomed red and orange. Smoke rose thick and black. Alarms screamed across the city. People ran to shelters carved deep in the hills. Daniel Hale walked through the chaos. He had come to the colony weeks earlier, on a visit no one questioned. He wore his same gray tunic, and carried his old datapad. He helped a teacher move children toward the underground doors. Spoke soft words, telling them it would pass like a bad storm. When the doors closed, he stepped outside, alone. The sky kept burning with more strikes hitting empty fields and storage buildings. The Clithians wanted to scare, not destroy everything yet. Daniel stood in an open square, looking up at the giant ship above. Cameras on the Dominion's Fang caught his image. Vexara watched the feed with her officers around her. She pointed at the small figure standing still, amid falling fire. "Look," she said, "the little shadow still stands. How brave or how stupid. Either way, he dies soon." Her bridge crew laughed. One officer zoomed the picture. Daniel's face looked calm. No fear showed. Vexara felt annoyed at his lack of panic. She ordered another strike closer, this time to make him run. A plasma bolt hit the ground 50 steps from him. Dirt exploded upward. Rocks flew. Daniel did not move. He lifted his datapad, typed quickly with steady fingers. The message went out fast, through a hidden relay, on the colony's moon. It carried no words, only a code string, short and sharp. Back on the flagship, Vexara saw no ships rise, no guns fire from the ground. She smiled wide and said, "See, they have nothing. No fleet, no defense. They break so easy. We take this world tomorrow." She turned away from the screen and started planning the landing troops. She wanted to walk on the surface herself, to claim it in person. She imagined the humans kneeling, begging for mercy. The thought made her scales glow bright with pleasure. Daniel lowered his datapad. He walked to a nearby shelter entrance. The door opened, just enough for him to slip inside. A guard asked if the children were safe. Daniel nodded. Once inside, he found a quiet corner, sat on the floor, and closed his eyes. He breathed slow and deep. His mind went back over years of training, nights without sleep, days of pain, lessons in silence and shadow. Above ground, the bombardment slowed. The Clythians wanted the colony alive for its resources. They sent drones to scan the damage. Vexara watched the reports with satisfaction. Most buildings still stood. The people hid, but they lived. She decided one more show of force, then the surrender demand again. A squadron of fighters dropped low. They flew over the city, firing warning shots into empty streets. Dust rose in clouds. People in shelters held each other tight. Daniel listened to the booms far above. He opened his eyes and checked his wrist. A small light blinked once, green. He stood up, walked to the shelter door. The guard tried to stop him. Daniel looked at the man and said, "Stay here. Keep them safe." The guard saw something in Daniel's eyes and stepped aside. Daniel went out into the smoke-filled air. He moved quick and low between ruined walls. He reached an old warehouse on the edge of town. Inside waited a hidden crate buried under junk. He pulled it free, opened the locks. Inside lay tools, weapons, small enough to hide, but deadly in skilled hands, strapped them under his tunic. Then he started walking toward the landing fields, where Clithian shuttles would soon touch down. Vexara grew bored of waiting. She ordered her captains to prepare the dropships. Thousands of troops would land at dawn. She wanted flags planted, human leaders in chains. She dreamed of the Concordance, hearing how easily the Dominion took a human world. On the planet, night fell cold and dark. Daniel moved through shadows. He avoided patrols of local guards who searched for survivors. He found a high hill overlooking the main landing zone. He lay flat and watched the sky. Ships glowed as they moved into position. He touched his datapad again. Another message went out, this one longer. It traveled the same secret path. The reply came back fast. Authorization granted. Proceed at will. Daniel read the words, closed the pad, and put it away. He looked at the stars hidden behind smoke. He thought about the people below, the children, the farmers, the teachers, thought about the promise made long ago when he joined the retainers. When they push too far, we push back harder. No mercy for those who bring fire to homes. He stood up slow. His body felt light, ready. He started down the hill toward the place where the first shuttles would land. The night stayed quiet, except for the low hum of engines far above. Vexara sat on her command throne. She sipped a drink and smiled at her officers. Tomorrow, she said, we claim another world. The humans will remember this day as the one they learned their place. She did not know that far below, one man moved through the dark. One man who looked harmless, who spoke soft, who carried no army behind him. Yet the code he sent woke things across the galaxy, things that slept for years, waiting for the right signal. The stars watched, silent and cold. The galaxy turned unaware that the first true step toward wrath had begun on a small quiet world called Epsilon Verge. Daniel disappeared from Epsilon Verge after the night of the first strikes. No one saw him leave the colony. The local guards searched the ruins and shelters but found no trace. People whispered that the quiet visitor had died in the fire or run away to hide. Most believed he was gone forever. Vexara received reports from the surface. Her troops landed at dawn without resistance. They marched through empty streets, raised flags, and claimed the world for the Dominion. She stood on the balcony of the governor's building, now her temporary command post. She looked out at the smoke still rising from distant craters and felt satisfaction. Her scales shimmered bright gold. She broadcast a message across the galaxy. The Clithian Dominion has secured Epsilon Verge, she said. The humans offered no fight. Their so-called strength proved empty. The Concordance must recognize our right to protect weak worlds from chaos. She ended the speech with a smile that showed sharp teeth. Days turned into nights, and the world breathed differently now. Weeks. The Clithians set up bases, mined rare metals and shipped them home. They treated the colonists like servants, forcing them to work the fields and factories under guard. Vexara returned to her flagship. She planned the next target, a richer system nearby. She believed the humans would stay quiet after losing one world so easily. Then strange things started to happen. First, a supply convoy vanished. 3 large freighters carrying fuel and weapons left a jump point and never arrived at the next. No distress call, no wreckage, just gone. Clithian scouts searched the route and found nothing. Vexara dismissed it as a navigation error. She ordered more ships to travel in groups. Next, a relay station on an empty asteroid went dark. It sent no final message. The lights simply stopped. Officers blamed old equipment. They sent a repair team. The team never reported back. More reports came in. Squadrons heard ghost signals on their comms. Human voices reading lists of names and numbers, calm and clear. The voices spoke of losses on Epsilon Verge. Then the signals cut off. Officers laughed at first, saying the humans tried weak tricks to scare them. Vexara grew annoyed. She ordered full scans of every system near the border. Nothing showed. She sat on her bridge, staring at holomaps. The losses piled up, small at first, then bigger. A patrol of 6 fighters disappeared near a nebula. A mining outpost on a moon exploded with no warning. Crews found pieces of Clithian armor floating in space, but no bodies. Vexara slammed her fist on the command table. Enough, she said. Find the source of these attacks. We crush whoever dares this. The intelligence officers worked day and night. They checked every possible enemy. None fit. The patterns looked random, yet precise. Too clean for pirates. Too silent for a full fleet. One officer brought her a recording from a surviving drone. It showed shadows moving fast through dark space. Tiny shapes too small for normal sensors. They darted like insects, then vanished. The officer said these could be new human weapons. Vexara stared at the grainy image. She remembered the little shadow on the planet, the calm man who stood under fire. She pushed the thought away. Impossible, she said. One man cannot do this. Far across the galaxy in hidden places, things woke up. Human sleeper assets long buried activated. Drones hidden under asteroid belts for decades powered on quietly. Merchant ships that looked ordinary changed course slightly. Research stations on distant moons finished final assembly of weapons never shown in public. These assets did not announce themselves. They waited for signals, then struck fast and vanished. No declarations, no fleets in formation, just silence and death. A Clethian battle group patrolled near the old human trade lanes, 5 heavy cruisers with full escorts. They detected a faint signal. Human music, old and soft, playing on an open channel. The captain laughed and ordered weapons ready for ambush. Nothing appeared. Music stopped. Then the first ship exploded from inside. A small device planted weeks earlier in the engine core triggered. All hands lost before alarms sounded. The other ships turned to scan. The second cruiser took hits from nowhere. Railgun rounds punched through armor at speeds too fast to track. Panic spread across the comms. The group tried to jump away. Jump drives failed. Someone had slipped code into their systems earlier. The third cruiser broke apart under missile swarms that came from empty space. The missiles looked old human designs, but carried new warheads that ignored shields. The last 2 ships fought back, firing blind into the dark. They hit nothing. The attackers stayed hidden, using gravity shadows and sensor ghosts. In minutes, the battle group became floating scrap. The survivors, if any, floated in escape pods with no rescue coming. Vexara received the news in her quarters. She stared at the report screen. Her aides stood silent, waiting for orders. And dangerous. They think they can hide. We will burn every system they touch until they show themselves. She ordered a full fleet mobilization. Hundreds of ships moved toward human space. They would sweep sector by sector, force the humans to fight in the open. She believed numbers would win. She believed humans feared open war. On a small moon, far from the fighting, Daniel worked alone. He had left Epsilon Verge on a stealth shuttle, painted black. He landed here days ago. The moon held an old human listening post, disguised as a research dome. He entered through hidden doors. Inside, screens glowed with data from across the galaxy. He sat at a console, typing commands. Ships moved on the maps, red for Clethian, blue for hidden human assets. He watched reports come in. Losses mounted on the enemy side. He felt no joy, only focus. He knew this was just the start. He opened a secure line to Earth Command. A voice answered, "Ready, retainer hail." Daniel spoke soft. Authorization codes confirmed. "Activate Phase 2. The voice replied, "Phase 2 active. Godspeed." Daniel closed the line. He stood up, stretched his body. He checked his weapons, small blades, tools for close work, devices to full sensors. He looked at a hollow picture on the wall. Children from Epsilon Verge, smiling in a schoolyard. He touched the image once, then turned off the lights. Outside the moon, the stars stayed cold. Ships moved in patterns only he understood. The galaxy still thought the humans weak. The galaxy still believed one lost colony meant nothing. Vexara stood on her bridge again. She looked at new maps showing her advancing fleets. She smiled thin and sharp. "Soon," she said, "soon we end this nonsense." She did not know that Phase 2 had begun, that across empty space, ugly hulks of ships woke from hiding. Not sleek like Clethian designs, but thick, armored, brutal. They carried railguns, fusion torches, missile swarms that broke every treaty limit. These ships waited in deep dark places. They waited for the final signal. They waited for the moment when restraint ended. Daniel left the moon in his small shuttle. He set course for the heart of the coming storm. He knew where Vexara would go next. He knew the flagship waited there. He flew silent and alone toward the place where worlds would change. The quiet man carried no army, yet the galaxy began to feel his shadow grow longer and darker with every passing hour. The Dominion's Fang hung in orbit above a fortified resupply station called Iron Veil. Massive rings of metal and guns protecting fuel depots, repair yards, and troop barracks. Vexara stood on the bridge, feeling safe behind thick armor and layers of defense ships. She watched Hollows show her fleets pushing deeper into human space, crushing small outposts with ease. She believed the worst was over. The humans hid and struck from shadows, but they could not face real power head-on. Alarms screamed without warning. Red lights flashed across every console. Point defense grids lit up, firing wildly at something too fast to track. Vexara grabbed the command rail. "What is this?" she shouted. An officer stammered. "Micro-contacts, too many, closing fast. They look like drones, sir, but small, faster than anything we have." Outside the station, swarms of Reaper-class fighters poured from hidden jump points. They moved like living things, twisting, dodging, weaving through laser fire. They carried no pilots. Cold code and hunger for targets. The first wave hit the outer defense ring. Explosions bloomed silent in vacuum. Armor plates tore away like paper. Vexara ordered full countermeasures. Launch all fighters, scramble the heavies. The Clithian ships responded slow and heavy. Their fighters launched in neat formations, easy to predict. The Reapers danced around them, cutting engines, ripping hulls. One by one, Clithian fighters died, bright flashes marking their graves. The station shook as missiles found weak points. Deep inside repair bays, fuel lines ruptured. Fire spread fast. Crews ran through corridors screaming. Vexara watched the chaos on her screens. Her scales turned dull gray with fear. She ordered the Fang to pull away. Engines roared. The flagship began to move. A single small shuttle slipped through the battle chaos. It looked old, battered, almost harmless. It matched speed with the Fang approached the hangar bay. No weapons fired at it. The Clithian gunners saw only junk. Docked hard, breaching the outer doors. Marines rushed to meet it. Daniel stepped out alone. He wore dark clothes that blended with shadows. His face stayed calm. He carried no big gun, only small tools hidden on his body. The first Marines opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the corridor. Daniel moved. He bent, twisted, slid between shots, like water through rocks. Years of training made his body remember what his mind planned. He closed the distance fast. One Marine swung a rifle butt. Daniel caught it, pushed, turned the weapon against its owner. The Marine fell. The next charged. Daniel stepped aside, used the momentum to send the soldier crashing into a wall. He moved forward, never stopping. More Marines came. He fought quiet and precise. A blade appeared in his hand, thin, sharp. It found gaps in armor joints. He did not waste motion. Every strike ended a threat. He left no survivors behind. The corridor filled with smoke and silence. He reached the inner lefts. Security door sealed. Small device on the panel. It hummed once. The doors opened. He stepped inside. The lift rose toward the bridge. Vexara paced on the command deck. Officers shouted updates. The station burned around them. Reaper swarms still attacked. The Fang took hits, shields failing. She turned to her tactical officer. "Get us out now. Jump if you have to." The officer shook his head. "Jump drives lock, sir." Someone inside the system jammed them. The lift doors opened. Daniel walked onto the bridge. Marines waited, rifles raised. He stopped 10 steps away. Vexara stared at him. Her eyes widened. "You," she said, "the little shadow." Daniel looked at her. His voice stayed soft. "You mistook restraint for harmlessness. That was your mistake." He lifted his wrist. A thin band glowed. He pressed it once. Across the galaxy, things happened at the same moment. Sleeper fleets emerged from dark space, ugly ships thick with armor, railguns long and black, missile tubes ready. They opened fire without warning. Groups vanished in bright spheres of relativistic kill vehicles. Moving so fast they punched through hulls before alarms sounded. Orbital fortresses long thought abandoned woke up. Mac cannons charged bright. They fired on supply lines, on command ships, on anything marked Clithian. The strikes came coordinated, perfect. No mercy, no pause. On the bridge, Vexara watched hollows die one by one. Her fleets broke, her empire cracked in hours. She turned back to Daniel. "How?" she asked. "How did one man do this?" Daniel stepped closer. "Not one man," he said. "All of us. When you burn homes, when you kill children, when you think we will kneel forever, we remember, we prepare, we wait. The quiet ones carry the loudest answer." He did not raise a weapon. He did not need to. The fangs shook again. The station outside exploded in fire. Reapers finished their work. The flagship listed. Engines died. Lights flickered. Vexara's officers dropped weapons. They knelt. Some cried. She stood tall, scales dull now, looked at Daniel, and saw no anger, only calm, cold certainty. She felt small for the first time. Escape pods launched from the Fang crew, fled into space. Daniel watched them go. He touched his wrist again. A signal went out. The Reapers pulled back. The sleeper ships held fire. The galaxy grew quiet again. Vexara sank to the floor. She stared at the dead screens. The dominion she built, gone in a day. She whispered, "Why not kill us all?" Daniel looked down at her. "Because we can stop. You never learned how." He turned, walked to the lift. The doors closed behind him. The bridge stayed silent, except for soft sobs from the remaining crew. Outside, the wreckage of Iron Veil floated in pieces. Reaper drones returned to their carriers. Sleeper ships vanished back into dark places. They left no trace, no messages. The Clithian fleets that survived limped home, broken and afraid. News spread fast across the Concordance worlds. Heard of the fall of the Dominion. They saw footage of empty space where proud ships once flew. They heard stories of one man boarding a flagship alone. They whispered the name Daniel Hale. Some called him Ghost, others called him Wrath. The quiet man returned to his small shuttle. He flew away from the ruin. He set course for home. No cheers followed him. No parades waited. He needed none. He had done what he came to do. The galaxy stared in shock at what humans could unleash when pushed too far. Species that once laughed now spoke careful words. They recalculated every plan, every border, every insult. They learned that Harmless could hide terrible strength. Vexara sat in chains, later on a prison habitat far from stars. She stared at walls and remembered the small man who walked onto her bridge. She remembered his soft voice and steady eyes. She understood too late what restraint really cost when it ended. The title spread through news feeds and council chambers. She mistook him for Harmless. Then his wrath stunned the galaxy. Laughed at it anymore. The dust of battle settled slow across the stars. Clithian ships that once ruled with fear now drifted broken or fled to hidden corners. The Dominion shrank fast. Worlds they claimed broke free. Systems they taxed turned silent. The Concordance watched in quiet shock as the mighty empire fell in days, not years. Human representatives returned to Nexus Prime. They walked into the Great Hall, not as observers this time, but as equals who had shown what waited behind their calm faces. Delegates from every species stared. No one mocked. No one laughed. The air felt heavy with new respect and old fear. Daniel Hale came back too. He wore the same gray tunic, carried the same old datapad. He sat in the back row again, listening more than speaking. When ambassadors asked questions about the strikes, he answered short and clear. "We defended our people," he said. "We stopped when the threat ended. We seek no empire, no revenge." Some aliens nodded, others looked away ashamed. Once called humans weak. How they ignored warnings, how they let the Clithians push too far. Now the proof floated in space, wreckage that told its own story. Vexara faced trial on a neutral habitat, far from any throne room. Chains bound her wrists. Guards stood silent around her cell. She lost her fine robes. Her bright scales looked dull and cracked. She stared at walls for long hours, thinking of the bridge where one man stood alone and ended everything. The Concordance allowed her one last meeting with Daniel. They brought him to the viewing room. A thick glass wall separated them. She stood on her side, he on his. Neither spoke at first. She broke the silence first. "Why show mercy now?" she asked, her voice rough and bitter. "You could have burned every world we hold. You could have ended us." Daniel looked at her through the glass. His face stayed calm. "Because we can stop," he said. "You burned homes, killed children, took what you wanted without thought. You never learned to pull back. We fight to end the fight, not to rule forever. Mercy is strength too. You never saw that." She lowered her head. Scales shifted to dark gray. She understood now, too late. The little shadow carried more than weapons. He carried choices. She had none left. He turned to leave. She called after him. "Wait, what happens to me now?" Daniel stopped. He looked back one time. "You live," he said. "You remember. You teach others what happens when pride blinds you. That is your sentence." He walked away. The door closed behind him. Vexara sat on the floor alone. The habitat spun slow around a quiet star. She stared at nothing, feeling the weight of worlds she lost. News feeds carried the title everywhere. She mistook him for Harmless, then his wrath stunned the galaxy. Traders whispered it in ports. Diplomats repeated it in meetings. Children on distant worlds learned it like a lesson. Species recalculated old plans. New treaties formed fast. Borders redrawn. Careful words replaced bold threats. Humanity did not celebrate. No parades filled Earth's streets. No songs praised the retainers. They returned to farms, factories, schools, quiet lives. Daniel went back to his small house on a green hill. He planted flowers, tended books, helped neighbors with broken machines. No one asked what he did before. He never told. Years passed. The galaxy changed, slow. Clithians rebuilt small, careful. They stayed in their old systems, never reached for more. Other species watched humans closer. Some sent gifts, some asked to learn. Some still feared, but fear turned to caution, not hate. One day a young diplomat from a new race visited Earth. He asked to meet Daniel. The quiet man agreed. They sat on a porch, drinking tea. The alien looked at the simple house, the flowers, the calm sky. He asked, "How did your people hide such power for so long?" Daniel smiled, small. "We did not hide it," he said. "We chose not to use it. We built homes, raised children, explored stars. We asked for peace first. Failed. We remembered how to answer hard. That is all." The diplomat nodded slow. He understood something new about humans. They looked harmless because they wanted to. They stayed quiet because they could afford to. When pushed, they pushed back with everything they kept ready. The alien left with new respect. He carried the story home. His people listened. They changed their maps, their plans, their words about the small species from a blue world. Daniel watched the sunset that evening. Stars appeared one by one. He thought about Epsilon Verge, about children who grew up safe, about families who rebuilt. He thought about Vexara sitting in her cell, learning slow lessons. He felt no hate, only quiet acceptance. He stood up, walked inside, closed the door. The night stayed peaceful. The galaxy turned on steady. Far away on Nexus Prime, ambassadors gathered again. They spoke of trade, of science, of shared space. Humans sat at the main table now. Their voice carried weight, not because they shouted, but because everyone remembered what happened when they stayed silent too long. No one mistook them for Harmless again. The shadow stayed small, but everyone knew what waited inside it. The title lived on in quiet conversations, in history records, in warnings passed between captains. It became a reminder across stars: never judge by what you see first. Some strength hides deep. Some wrath waits patient. Some mercy comes only after everything else fails. Humanity walked its path again, calm, steady, building, dreaming, living. They carried no banners of conquest, no fleets of fear. They carried datapads, books, children, hopes, and the knowledge that if needed, they could answer any challenge. The galaxy learned to listen when they spoke soft. It learned to respect the quiet ones. It learned never to test the Harmless again. Daniel sat with his old datapad one evening. He opened a file. Pictures of smiling faces from Epsilon Verge scrolled slow. He closed it, set the pad aside, looked out the window at stars bright and endless. He whispered one word only: enough. Then he turned off the light. The house went dark. The night held peace. The story ended not with fire, but with silence, a silence stronger than any roar.